the residents had some concerns. And I just wanted this to be a conversation about what next steps we might be recommending after that conversation, or any type of educational or outreach programs that might help the project along. So I'd love to hear from people who were actually able to attend in live time. Go ahead, Shelley.
I thought there was some confusion on the part of the neighbors about the definition of affordable housing, that maybe we should have clarified before we went into that kind of a meeting with them. They're thinking, you know, John Avalar and Thompson Woods housing, as opposed to what we have in mind, you know. And I think some of their concerns might have been alleviated right before we even got started if that had been clearer to them. So my thought is we probably can start there with educating just the town in general. As we bring up these discussions of potential housing projects, they'll need to have a clearer view of what we mean when we say housing project or affordable housing project. People, you know, raised some good concerns about the effect on the neighborhood and whether the driveway should be on the Quail Hill Road side or on the other side. And they were concerned about things like dumpsters and, you know, additional noise and additional light to their homes. I think all of which were recommended that they write that stuff down and submit it, and I'm assuming they have or will. The presentation I thought was, they were in favor of doing something positive with the area, you know, with the lot. And I think overall the design was favored, you know, the idea of multiple buildings and that would fit in with the neighborhood view was accepted. There were different suggestions, but overall they seem to be in favor of that.
Did anyone else want to add anything?
Well, I only listened to the video. I wasn't there live, but I did hear some concerns about the number of units and some concern about the mix. That is, some desire to have more family housing, so not as many one bedrooms. So I did hear that specifically.
I also heard that, Marcia, the idea that to incentivize more family type or accommodate more families than the single bedrooms. So just before this meeting, I did look back at our affordable housing study, which I understand that they may not have been aware of at the onset of the meeting. And looking at it, our study really only called for eight family units of the 100 that was recommended over the next 10 years, which, you know, that speaks to what the need is, not necessarily what we may aspire to as a town, or taking a position on who we'd like to try to attract more to the community. So, you know, I think that that's a distinction that needs to be made, and that's also what's driving where we're going with the projects that are coming forward. So perhaps one thing we could do is summarize the summary of the study and distribute it in a way that might be more helpful and more direct. The executive summary, I think is still 10 pages from that housing study. So that was one suggestion I had coming out of the feedback, was to try to educate them on where we're coming from and why we were propose what we were proposing.
And I think at the end, Fran did come on and try to give a background of what we've been doing, because there was an impression with the group that this just came out of nowhere. We just decided to buy this. And why did we decide to buy it? And I think that was a little misleading in terms of what we've been trying to express with, you know, with the town. And once again, does anybody ever read the newspaper? We don't know. But anyway, I just think that they, you know, didn't really understand that this had been a long-term project as opposed to something that just came up today. So I think we need to go back and reaffirm that. My other question is, I think the study is important, and I actually went back and started reading it again. I think there's a lot of things, but in terms of the numbers and the recommendations, that is one point in time. But I think after listening to these people, it made me start thinking about a lot of things, and in terms of what the community thinks that they want at this point in time as well. So I think the study is important as a basis, but I don't think we should be attached to it so much that we don't hear what the people are saying.
Right.
If we want to have response for, a good response for this project and other projects in the neighborhood. I also felt that by the end, it would seem like, well, whatever you want, come back and tell us. And I think that was sort of the ending of it. And I understand the need for input, but do we have the courage of our convictions that this is a good program, a good project? Because we as the trust, or we as the affordable housing, we thought it was a pretty good project when it was presented. And then by the end of the meeting, I did feel that people saying, well, maybe we'll make 3 little congregate houses, or maybe we'll sell it back to somebody else, or maybe we'll do this, or maybe we'll do that. And I appreciate the idea that people wanted to share their opinions, but as a trust in affordable housing, we have to have something in some ways to say, this is what we believe in, or else where's the leadership, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Nancy, and I did appreciate during the meeting, Fran jumping in and alerting people to the fact that this study existed, because I think that, a misstep was not getting some of that information about all the work that had been done previously out to the neighbors, so they had an understanding of that. And I agree that perhaps, getting it, it's certainly not too late. There's going to be a lot in this process. Getting that summary together and maybe even summarizing the summary, if you will. But I think to your point is to getting this in the hands of the people who are going to be affected by this, the public. And it was done in a point in time, and perhaps there's a need to, get their input and see if there are some revisions necessary to it. Because I think you're right. I think some of it kind of almost like they were almost blindsided about what they were hearing. And, some of the people did react positively to this preliminary design. Others seem to take it as, well, this is the design and we're going to have to live with it. And we don't have any input. And the other message that you just said was, well, you tell us what should be there and we'll take that into consideration, which I understand the intent is. We want to know what the feelings are and what the position may be. But I think there's obviously, what I came away with was the more work that needs to be done on this. But I think your suggestion of taking that summary and taking a look at it is a good one.
Fran, did you have anything to add?
Only that I thought it was important that George really made the point is that with the input from the neighbors, then the RFP would be crafted to put out. Not that we would just do what the neighbors said, but using the input and their preferences, how can we craft our RFP to move our project forward in a way that is compatible with the neighbors' wishes. So that was, I thought, an important point that George made several times.
Let me
Yeah,
just
sure.
say, as an outsider, because I've sat through about 300 of these meetings. So one, the blood pressure goes up right away. And I was saying, good thing I'm retired now. But 2, I thought it actually was fine. For a resident meeting, I thought it was fine. I thought Fran coming forward and saying, we've been studying this for a while, et cetera, and there's a whole needs document. That's absolutely essential. But I don't think they're going to read the report and say, oh, in that case, I won't have concerns. They're going to have their concerns. So the important thing, which I think this did, was lay out a process and assure them they will have continuing role in the process. So overall, once my blood pressure came down, I thought it was a very good meeting.
Great, well, thank you. Yeah, Andrea.
Katie, I think one of the things that the meeting pointed to build on what Marcia just said, is that overall, and this will be a partnership with the select board, I believe, but I think you guys can do some of the advocacy if you choose, is that wherever housing goes in, it's about welcoming the next generation or making room for people in our community. And we do that in the context of neighborhoods. And so if in advocating for housing, there's an awareness that that housing is fitting into and maybe enhancing the capacity of that neighborhood to carry itself forward with new residents, you will automatically set up a conversation in a way that respects, because I heard that abutters were threatened by all kinds of things, property values going down, degrading of the neighborhood, the ambiance. And I think if the committee can advocate from a point of view of respect of neighborhoods, I know that the select board is going to be working on wayfinding studies, and the cultural district is going to be building a campaign to identify neighborhoods. And so as it'll eventually come together, that there's a respect, especially if you define a process that has the contributions of neighbors and abutters impact. There's a way for them to impact design, not control it, but to impact it. So I think this is going to be, it takes 10 years to establish culture, and we're just learning how to do this in town now. So I was heartened by the meeting.
Well, I think I was too, and I thought it opened a window for us as a committee in terms of, that's the reason I went to it initially, was to see what kind of questions came up, what kind of things, because up till now, we've been sort of just thinking, what should we do? And I think that if we went through that whole video and went through, I think it would give us an outline of how we could do this even better. And I think that was the purpose of the whole thing. The other piece that I noticed is that we've been looking at that piece from Main Street. We have not been looking at it from behind Main Street, from Quail Road, or Lane, or whatever it was, Quail. And that came very clear that yes, it's a beautiful picture to fill the hole in Main Street. But none of us that I can ever remember talked about how it looked from behind. And so for that, I think it gave us another perspective that we may not have heard about.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's a great thought, Nancy. Thank you for that. So does anybody else have a suggestion of what we might be able to do going forward? Or did I have a volunteer that might want to look over the executive summary and try to summarize it a bit? Either or.
Oh, I'm
I
happy
will.
to work on some sort of an outline for an initial session of community education about a project like that, which would include this information that's in the summary and maybe some information that's in the study. Be happy to have somebody work with me, but
If you want to start that, I'll help with you. We can work on it sort of back and forth if you want to do that.
okay.
I started doing a little bit of that myself after this meeting, so I'd
Yeah.
love to have somebody to use some more brain power,
Good.
another approach to it. I think that would be a good thing to do.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. So let us know.
You wish. Sorry.
I second that motion.
So sorry about that. In that sentiment, if we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, this one should be fairly quick. I got an email from a member of the Recreation Committee asking whether or not the Affordable Housing Committee would support the community center study. It was originally supposed to be on a town, this past town warrant. It got postponed because of COVID. It was one of those things that they were trying to streamline the town meeting. I'm sure I'll get corrected if I'm wrong. I believe it's looking for $75,000 to do a study, a feasibility study of a community center, which would include, currently owned property, reusing a property, or seeking to purchase another one. I will, in all clarity, let you know that my husband was the person who requested the petition be put on the town warrant, but he's also a member of the Recreation Committee who have now adopted it and are supporting that warrant article. And they voted to request other support from other committees in town. So
You looking for a motion to support it?
if there is a climate for that with you guys, yes, I was wondering if you would be willing to support that article.
I would certainly support the community center feasibility study and any warrants that would begin that process. It's something that we talk about the other needs in our community, and that I believe has been talked about and recognized for a long time. So I'd make a motion to support the community center feasibility study.
And just to jump off from there, Bill, the request was if we're willing to support it, willing to write a letter in support to I believe it's the finance committee or the board or the board of selectmen, which I'm happy to draft if we have the support from the committee.
I would add that to the motion if we need to, certainly. Yeah.
So as I understand it, Bill's motion is to support the recreation committee's request to support the feasibility study and draft a letter to the board of selectmen and or the finance committee in support of that. Do I have a second to Bill's motion?
Second,
Nancy, can I ask if there's any further discussion? Fran?
I support it as an individual. I just don't know that it's in our purview as a committee to support another project that is not affordable housing. So I don't support it.
Okay. I was wondering that when I made the motion and when I asked if we should have a motion. I think my feeling would be that as a committee in town that is looking at one particular aspect of the needs of the town, that it may not be specifically in any of our charges, but I would say that it's within the feasibility of being an active committee looking at a specific need, that we recognize there are other needs that should be addressed in town. So I understand, because as I said, when I was making the motion, I was wondering, I wonder if we're allowed to do that. But I would say in my mind that because of what I stated, that it's within our purview to support other activities in town.
Anybody have any other thoughts on that?
Is this normally done? I don't know how the town works.
I don't know that we've ever been asked to support another committee's agenda item. I can't say that I recall that ever happening. I would share in Bill's thoughts that I think if we're trying to bring more housing to the community, that those individuals are going to need to be served in one way or another, and providing those amenities. And I think it goes to a broader goal of maybe thinking about what we would like our community to look like, and the ability to meet the needs of the individuals we're hoping that are going to be living in affordable housing. So I do think that we can. If I'm wrong, I will obviously let you know that if I hear that in the future. But that was my thought in putting it on the agenda today. Yes, Andrea.
I can tell you that the planning board is often asked to endorse things that are not within, I mean, the planning board has a bigger purview, but we have been asked to, for instance, support complete streets or do other things, letters of support. So to Fran's point, I don't know what the charter says on that, but again, you could err on, it's an infrastructure investment that impacts other capacities, to Bill's points. So you can ask for forgiveness or permission. You guys are your own committee, right?
Any other comments on it?
I think I'm taking back my second because now I don't understand what we're doing. So motion is still on the floor because I'm not sure I know where we're going with this.
Okay, so the original motion was to write a letter of support for the Recreations Committee's warrant to have a feasibility study on the town warrant. That was Bill's motion. That's the one on the floor. Is there a second to that motion? Shelley is the second. Any other discussion? Then we can vote. Nancy?
I think I'm going to abstain from this one.
Okay. Fran?
No,
Shelley?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Marcia?
I need to abstain because I don't even know what the proposal is, so.
Okay. Rich? I'm getting a head nod from Rich. Is that right? Is that a yes, Rich? Okay. Rich is a yes, and I'm also a yes. So that is 4,
2.
1, 2.
2.
Abstaining is last, right?
Yeah.
4, 1, 2. On that motion. So as I said, I'm happy to draft the letter. And go from there. Okay, moving on. So there is still an open invitation for us to join the Finance Committee meeting on September 24th. I do intend on attending that meeting. They were looking for some clarification. They did just want to meet with the Affordable Housing Committee as opposed to the trust. I am looking for a volunteer to come with me. Perhaps I should have put this after the reorganization item on the
Do they
agenda.
have questions or they just want to have a general discussion? That was my question.
Yeah, I didn't, let me go back and see if I can pull up the email from Lynn, but it was more of just a general request for ways that they may be able to support affordable housing efforts and get I think everybody's, including the Board of Selectmen, are looking for clarity on the differences between, or the different charges for the Affordable Housing Committee and the trust. And I'm hoping
We can
to
do
start
it.
making those lines a little clearer for everybody.
I'm feeling a little punchy. It must be time for a drink. Excuse me, but I'm telling you, I'm thinking, okay.
So if anybody would like to join me on that meeting, Lynn did invite all or a few of us, whoever might be available. And it is 7 o'clock as the agenda indicates. No?
Well, I'd be glad to come, but I don't know that I could answer any questions, but I'm
Right.
curious. So I'd come just to learn the situation.
I'm happy to go as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, as many of us who are able should feel free to
I think
come.
we should go and see what they have to ask.
Yeah.
And you can be the spokesperson because you know what the differences are.
I think, I think that I agree. I think we should all go. I think these spokespersons can be plural, could be the outgoing chair and the incoming chair as the spokespeople for that. So we'll see.
So send it out to the whole committee then. I think that'd probably be the best way.
Yeah, so I'll see if I need to post an agenda or if we're more going as individuals. I'm feeling like it's probably going to be a
Yeah.
something we need an agenda.
Good point, Katie. If it looks like it's going to have to be a posted meeting, some of us can just watch it. If it's going to be I don't know if that'd be an issue or not, but if it becomes one, I think you could advise us all and then just have, certain select members of the committee be actual in attendance. And I'm sure it's going to be a meeting that's open to the public and we could watch it and then not have to post it as a formal meeting of the committee.
Are we guests or is it a joint meeting? I guess that's the question.
Well, I think it depends. Anytime you show up as a full committee,
Yeah.
it's a meeting of the committee. So whether you're a guest or, I don't know. I'm not trying to create issues. I'm just saying that if it becomes an issue, we could back off and some of us can watch it rather than being saying, okay, I'm here.
Sure.
Katie, that's something maybe you could talk to Lynn
Talk
about.
to Lynn about it.
Yeah, I'll obviously talk to Lynn again. I was just reviewing the email. It was more of, just an update and to let them know where we're at. And again, the differences between the trust and the committee and our separate roles as they are. So I will talk to her and I'll let you all know where we go from there. But if you're available, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to hold off on 8 8, just in the entrance of its 6:09. We've been at it for almost going on 2 hours. So I'm going to hold off on that, other than to say that at our last meeting, we voted to ask George to have the planning board consider additional inclusionary zoning recommendations, and he did do that. So they will hopefully be considering that at their next meeting. And George is out for the next couple of weeks, so we'll hear from him, I'm sure, at our next meeting as where that's going. I'm going to leave it to Fran and Andrea where they want to go. We had them on the agenda, and again, this agenda was before we had the executive session in mind, to talk about some of the ideas we had for our initiatives going forward. So do you guys want to address them now, or did you want to wait for a time that we might have more of a discussion? Go ahead, Fran.
I'm happy to talk about what my assignment was briefly, and then I think we will want more conversation about these issues because we were talking about the Penrose project in Auburn, which was a mixed income housing project that I had brought up at our last meeting. And I was invited by the group to be in touch with Charlie Adams around the financing of a mixed use project. And subsequently, in speaking with George, became obvious that Penrose and Cape Cod 5 were actively talking, and we thought, George and I, that it would be better for me not to be in touch with Charlie Adams at that point in time, let all the negotiations proceed. So I did not. On the other hand, what I did was I studied a little bit about the history of financing affordable housing, and which I thought I might share with you. And that I have to say I have a in-house tutor on this, but I've also been reading this book, which might be of interest to other people. It's called The Color of Law. And it is about, it's by Richard Rothstein, and it's about the history of housing in our country. And so that really piqued my interest. And so those are my two sources here. So I'm going to talk about different phases that housing has gone through and financing of affordable housing. And the first phase begins in around 1936 with the Federal Housing Act that occurred during the Depression. And essentially that act provided 100% funding for housing for 100% low-income people. And so there were projects that were created where other people lived, and they were segregated by government action according to race, that Black people could live in one housing development project, white people could live in another housing project. And that was all set up by our government and followed with the banking and insurance regulations that reinforced that segregated housing. Phase 2, in the 50s, the urban renewal came in, and it was using municipal power to take sites from the private sector into the public sector. And during that urban renewal process, private sector monies began to be involved in the production of affordable housing, and that the government encouraged private sector monies coming in by giving tax incentives in low interest rates. So now we have a combination of 100% government financing, and we have low interest rates bringing in private funding. It was still segregated in the 50s. However, you remember, of course, in the 60s, we have the Civil Rights Act, and it became illegal to segregate neighborhoods and segregate housing by race. And it isn't that it stopped immediately, but at least it became illegal officially. So then we move on to the 70s and the 80s in the Reagan years. And there were grant subsidies that were replaced by investment tax credits. And we're much more familiar with the investment tax credit financing function. So now you have government is not appropriating money, but now they have begun this program where if private people buy tax credits, they can reduce their tax burden. And so it brought in a broader range of incomes up to 100% of AMI, as opposed to 80% of up to 80% of AMI. And now moving to what I would call phase 4, but more currently, there are not new programs per se, but there's a new way of looking at creative financing opportunities that also includes looking at social issues. And so when I was looking up Penrose, I found that Penrose has a number of projects that are mixed income projects. And one in Auburn, which was a senior housing development, which includes a mixture of totally 55 units with studio, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. 80% of the units will be for seniors at below 60% AMI. An additional 20% of the units will be available at market rate. Penrose has another project in Fairfax County, Virginia, a big one, where it'll be 216 affordable rental apartments, 63 affordable senior independent living apartments, and 175 market rate appointments of townhouses on a 12-acre public park. And then there is another mixed income housing that I wanted to talk a little bit more about. It's by the Wind Company, and they've done a number of affordable mixed income housing developments. And this particular one is in the city of Lowell, and it's a big one. But I was interested in the financing because we were wondering about, do you take a bucket money from this bucket and put it towards affordable units, or this bucket, and how do you divide that up? And they don't have to divide it up, because how it works in this particular project is that the Bank of America purchases federal and state low-income housing tax credits. And at the same time, they loan the developer the money for construction. And so it's not a subsidy for a certain number of units, but what it is that if there are mixed income, either units for sale or for rent, the folks those units bring in more money than they would get if it was 100% affordable. And that money allows for the operating costs of the developer to bring in more money in either rent or profit when they sell. So they need less subsidy in the upfront way to finance the development. So that is a creative way of doing it, and it's far more complex than I begin to understand. But I think that it bypasses our discussion about buckets of money and how one can create housing for people who don't fit in our purview of financing affordable housing with up to 100% AMI, but certainly can fulfill a need for people who make greater than 100% AMI and for whom there is no stock for either rent and very little stock for purchase, which I think we have talked about. Should we worry about finding out a way to help this population? Well, not directly, but I think the very fact that we can provide affordable housing and that developers can look at new and creative ways of financing that affordable housing that will allow for our subsidies not have to be as high as they would have otherwise. And I think just in terms of social justice, that we need as a committee and as a town to have conversation about how do we want our affordable housing laid out in our town? Do we want big developments? Do we want small developments? Do we want it integrated? Do we want, we can't segregate it according to race because that's illegal, but we could segregate it according to income if that's our choice, which is not a choice that I personally support. So this is just an invitation for that conversation going forward.
Thanks, Fran. I would be interested to see if those were RFPs that the town put out for those mixed properties or projects, I should say, or if they were a product of the developers, you know, trying to make, you know, a project work. I would be interested to see, and if it isn't if it is an RFP, I'd like to see it, just to see how it was structured and,
Sure.
you know, I'm intrigued. I think it's certainly something that we should have a conversation about. And when you frame it in the form of, by having the market rate units bringing in additional income that could help support the affordable units, I think that adds to the conversation
Right.
about advocating for those even under our current charge.
Right.
So I'm happy to, well, it won't be me, but perhaps we should revisit this at another agenda item in the future if we're able to nail it down. So take a look at the RFP and see how it's done in other towns. Just for information.
If I can just offer, and I'll be glad to do some research too, the projects that I've been involved with usually did involve nonprofit housing developers that usually brought in a range of resources. There was a great deal of the tax credit because you had to find investors who were willing to do that, major banks, but also the state agencies, et cetera. I do remember a couple of projects in which, I mean, there were some mixed income, but to some extent, mixed income is not only more complicated in ways, but I know there were at least a couple of projects which, because of the source of funding, mixed income actually became more expensive to do. There is more rent coming in, maybe, depending on what the rent subsidies are for the subsidized units. But also, if you're getting special purpose money from state agencies, for example, those are usually targeted to affordability standards. So I remember a couple of projects in which introducing middle income residents actually made the project less profitable, which is interesting that that would be the case, but it's the complications of how the various sources are mixed up together and go out in the investment market and grab state money from this and national board for this, et cetera. So it's often very complicated and sometimes counterintuitive.
Well, Marcia, anything you have from your experience that could add to the conversation, we'd obviously like to know about.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't realize Penrose is down in Fairfax County. So I do remember at Penrose, so I'll have to look them up and see if the same people that was involved in Arlington projects. There was a Penrose involved in a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the purpose of this was to get a better education about how we could, or if we should, support mixed income development, and if so, how to do so. So, Fran, I appreciate the background and the information you have, and I think it is a conversation we should continue to have going forward. So, whomever might be doing the agenda going forward, I hope that you reach out should you find some more interesting information about it. Anything else on that before I see if Andrea wants to chat about her agenda item? Okay, Andrea?
I very respectfully would like to table our agenda for the hour so that we can come freshly to it, because it works with Fran's agenda and it works with so many of the issues you discussed, endorsing a community center. And I would like to have a conversation with you in terms of post-sewer planning for Orleans and the role that I think the committee can have in advocating for housing in the context of that planning. And this is not the hour to do that, if that's okay. I'd like to
Sure.
come back to it.
Absolutely. So would you like to have that conversation sooner than later, perhaps on a next agenda item, or
I say fit it in, and again, I am very concerned with you guys. Kind of, it's like click your heels together, Dorothy. You know, you got to find where your power is here relative to the trust. So I'm going to you put me wherever you want that conversation. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. So that brings us next to the board reorganization, and I'm realizing as Marcia was telling us about projects that she was familiar with, I apologize for the background noise. I skipped over welcoming her as the agenda item, so I'm gonna hop back to that. And Marcia, I think most of us saw your introduction at the Board of Selectmen meeting, but if you could just give us a little bit of background about what brought you to us, that would be great.
Okay, well, I should say our connection with the Cape, my husband's family has been long in the Wellfleet area. So they've been forever and we've been coming every summer, etc. But we only bought our house down in Orleans. Horrors, we moved away from Wellfleet in 2013. So I've been in Orleans since then. And then we went permanent full-time once we both retired in the end of 2018. So I'm pretty new as a full-time resident. But in my personal history, I'm a professional planner, that is a city and regional planner by occupation. I've been involved in community development and neighborhood planning for about 40 years. And then I went to work, among other jobs. I finally landed in Arlington County, which is right next to Fairfax, right across the river from DC. And I spent 37 years in Arlington County. First in the planning department, mostly in neighborhood planning, community development, and then in the Department of Human Services, where I eventually became Director of Human Services for Arlington, and then over in the County Manager's office, where I became Deputy County Manager for about 10 years. So in all that time, housing has been a constant. I've been involved in homeless issues, domestic violence issues, as well as housing production and all the years of federal programs or the lack of federal programs. And then most recently in a lot of these projects, Arlington's pretty active in housing development using tax exempt bonds, as well as tax credits, as well as having a host of regional and local nonprofit developers are actually very sophisticated and very, very good. So that was one of the things I'd like to hear about, is who your developers are here. So I retired in 2015, 2016. And that's when I moved up here and I took a little bit of a rest, but now I'm ready to jump back into a subject that's near and dear to my heart.
Well, thanks, Marcia, and we're so happy to have you and all that experience. So we appreciate you taking the time to join our committee. And with that in mind, we are looking at a reorganization of our committee. I am looking to step down as the chair, and I am hoping that I have some members who may be willing to step up to a position as chair, vice chair, and perhaps reorganization of the clerk role. So do I have any comments on the reorganization? Shelley?
Question, are you staying on the trust?
Yes, I just renewed actually both of my memberships. So I expired in June for this committee as well as the trust, because the trust was just formed, so they stagger yours. But I think the trust is 2-year terms as opposed to the committee, which is 3. So yes, I'm not going anywhere. Just with the new addition coming, I'm just looking to take a slightly less active chair role. Bill, I saw you take it off mute. Go ahead.
I'd like to first of all welcome Marcia, and just before even her introduction, it was apparent from her contributions during our meeting, our long meeting tonight, to get an opportunity. She is going to be welcome because she's going to be a great addition with a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge, and I look forward to working with her. And before, this may not be the time, but to thank you, Katie, for your service to this committee. And, I'm so glad. I mean, all of us were concerned and say, what's that really mean? But you have committed. You're on record now of committing for at least the rest of your term. So having said all that, I would like to nominate Nancy Wren as chair of this committee going forward.
Great. I appreciate the nomination. Nancy, are you willing to accept that nomination as chair?
Yes.
Great. I would just be looking for a motion and a second and hopefully a vote to appoint Nancy, unless there's anyone else who would like to contend with her position as chair.
It's fine. Go right ahead.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, I thought I made it in the form of a motion, but if I didn't, I will make it in the form of a motion. And I will also ask that the motion include, we close off further nominations to as chair.
Jeez.
Thanks, Bill. So we have a motion to elect Nancy as the chair of the Affordable Housing Committee. Do I have a second?
Did you want to do something, say something? Or Shelley
I
had
was
raised
just-
her hand.
I was just going to second it.
Oh, okay.
Shelley is a second. Any other discussion? Let's have a vote then. Nancy, I'll let you vote first.
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Marcia,
Yes,
Richard.
Yes.
Thanks, Rich. And being that Nancy is taking over the chair, I do have a nomination to make for clerk, but maybe we'll touch on the vice chair role and then do the clerk's role. Did I have a nomination? Or I'm going to open nominations for the vice chair role.
I was going to nominate Bill Stocker for the vice chair. This sounds like something. Can we do? But I don't want to take it away from you either, Katie. So we talked about this a little bit, but decided to nominate Bill Stocker for vice chair.
Second.
Second, any further discussion on the nomination and motion to appoint Bill as our vice chair? Great. All those in favor, Nancy,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Marcia,
yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. And then lastly, we did need to fill Nancy's role that was, I think, only interim as it was, or acting clerk. And I think Rich may be willing to accept a nomination and appointment to the clerk position. So do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Thanks, Fran. Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Let's vote. Nancy,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Marcia,
Yes.
Rich.
Accepted.
Thank you. And I'm also a yes.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you all stepping up into the new roles, and feel free to reach out with questions.
And thank you for your support for this. I will need all of you in order to make this a successful transition. So let's not, we'll all do this together.
Thank you for stepping forward, Nancy.
Okay. You're welcome.
And last thing is to approve our minutes from July 21st and August 4th. Since we're doing it by roll call, I'm going to do them together unless there's any amendments that anybody would like to make to those minutes. Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Second,
Second,
Rich,
Rich. Nancy, I'm sorry, let's vote. Nancy,
yes,
Fran,
Yes,
Shelley,
Yes,
Bill,
Yes.
Marcia.
Let me abstain since I wasn't there.
Okay, on either?
No,
No.
Okay,
my first meeting.
okay, and Rich.
yes.
Okay, and I'm also a yes.
okay,
So what's that? 601.
all right.
So thank you guys. That was a long meeting. I appreciate all of your attention. And as things are breaking down at my house, I am going to close it out. Our
Thank
next
you,
meeting is
Katie.
October 6th.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 thank
Bye.
you. Katie.
Katie. Thanks, everybody.